and Greg Cole, Chief Operations Officer, who will be providing some details on proposals and information about how community members can provide feedback. I'll begin tonight with why we're here. We need to make some attendance area boundary adjustments at the elementary level throughout the district and at the middle school in the Blaine High School cluster. This meeting will also share proposed boundaries for Franklin Elementary families for next year. I do want to be clear that we are not proposing boundary changes at the high school level at this time. In Anoka-Hennepin generally, schools in long-established neighborhoods have fewer students, while schools in rapidly growing areas have many more. Most of our schools are clustered in those older neighborhoods in the southern two-thirds of the district, and fewer schools are located in the northern third, where we're experiencing the most growth right now, specifically in Blaine and Ramsey. The student population around some of our schools is declining, and on the other hand, the population around other schools is exploding. The growth in some of our communities is both exciting and challenging for us because we have to ensure a high-quality learning environment and a similar learning experience at every single one of our schools. And when schools are overcrowded, teaching and learning are impacted. For example, in one of our schools, it's so overcrowded that they can't utilize their media center for the purpose which it was intended because it's being divided and used as classroom space. One of our elementary schools is so crowded that they don't have a classroom for every teacher, so teachers move from room to room on a rolling cart. Some of our schools may not have enough space to provide small group support for intervention and academic support or enrichment in classrooms. Rather, they're providing that support sometimes in hallways and atriums. Restrooms, lunchrooms, and other common areas may also be crowded in some of our schools. Some programming is significantly impacted. For example, some of our Sunrise Elementary School kindergarten students actually received their kindergarten programming at Johnsville Elementary this year. So as a result, attendance area boundary changes will be needed at the elementary level at two Blaine cluster middle schools to balance enrollment across the district. So tonight, we'll be sharing information about process, about timeline. We'll be sharing some information about how we'll work to transition families and students smoothly from one place to another. We'll be sharing some themes of community feedback that we've heard, and we'll also be sharing about opportunities for additional feedback that can still be provided to our school board. In order to help you feel well informed, once we're done sharing information, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Staff members will be stationed around the room and at MAPS to answer questions directly, and we'll facilitate getting you to someone else in the room if we can't answer your question. We're also collecting feedback electronically, and we'll have staff members here to assist you with that this evening. We appreciate that you're here tonight and listening in so that you can get the facts and share your perspectives. We know through our annual survey that our families and students love their schools, and that's why making boundary adjustments is so challenging. You'll hear more tonight about the work that we do to help families and students transition if they need to. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mary Wolverton, Associate Superintendent for Elementary Schools.
Thank you, Dr. McGuire. The boundary update, as we're discussing this tonight, is in alignment with a strategic priority. The boundary adjustment is an action step to ensure efficient operations of district facilities and programs. Anoka-Hennepin, like all school districts, must periodically make changes to balance student enrollment to ensure that all students have the opportunity to receive comparable educational experiences. As we consider the timeline in this process, once the decision is made on the boundaries, the new boundaries will be implemented in the fall of 2023 for the 2023-24 school year. The school board is seeking input and feedback from staff and community prior to making that decision in November. Community meetings, as we are hosting tonight, have been afforded in the month of September and now in October in each of our clusters within the school district. On this PowerPoint, on this slide here, you can see a quick glance at the timeline that we have in place for the boundary process and the boundary decision making. In the month of September, we hosted a first round of community meetings at each of our area high schools. Now we are hosting our second round of community meetings during this month of October. And in November, on November 7th, the district team will go forward to the school board with our first round of recommendations. And at the November 21st school board meeting, there will be a final decision on boundaries that would go into place the fall of 2023. In the month of December then, families who would be impacted by new attendance areas for the fall of 2023 will be informed, and as noted, then those new attendance areas are implemented in September of 2023. As we consider those transitions for our students and our families, after the decision is made and families are informed, we will work at each of our elementary schools, collaborating with principals on how we can support our students and our parents in that transition process. One of the areas that we know is very supportive for all of our students in that process, in all of our elementary schools, we offer the same curriculum and the same programming district-wide, which is greatly supportive for our students in any transition. As we consider the parameters in our boundary process, there are variable parameters that guide our recommendations to support our decision making. One is that we have a teacher-student ratio for class sizes established by the school board through the boundary process that helps guide and inform our recommendations for adequate space within our boundary process. Specifically at the elementary level, we look at focusing on lower teacher-student ratios in our primary grades, specifically kindergarten and first grade. This supports us in ensuring that educational supports and programming is based on the student demographics of the attendance area, also in supporting our students with their programming within each of our elementary schools. Additional parameters that we consider in this process is we strive to ensure that all students have the opportunity to receive comparable educational experiences. We follow state guidelines within our boundary process, and we also factor in utilizing district resources efficiently. Additional parameters that are considered in this process is we design bus rides that are of reasonable lengths. We also facilitate walking to school for students who are living within a mile of their school. The one variable we consider with that, though, is we also look at if there are hazardous roads that a student may need to cross within that mile, and then that's when we consider potential transportation in that process. And another variable is that we look at boundaries being contiguous and adjoining where possible to minimize disruption, ensuring efficiency. As was noted previously, we are maintaining current high school attendance areas boundaries at this time. Additionally, in our recommendation, we're factoring current growth and potential future growth with our recommendations within our residential development in our attendance areas. And at the elementary level, striving to ensure that boundaries are established and remain in effect at the elementary level for 5 years and 10 years at the secondary level. At this time, I'd like to introduce Greg Cole, our Chief Operations Officer.
Welcome everybody. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. I just want to start off by acknowledging, as Dr. McGuire mentioned earlier, how difficult boundary changes can be. One of the great things about Anoka-Hennepin is a lot of families love to be in our school district, and they seek us out. And then as a part of that, they love their schools, and that is terrific. But when you go through a boundary change process, that simultaneously makes it really hard if you're the one who has to move. So we want to acknowledge that. We're going to take a look at some maps now, just to kind of explain our recommendations, knowing that final decision will not be made until the second school board meeting in November. So we still have time, and we're still receiving feedback as a part of this process. For those who may or may not know, just to kind of give you your bearings, we do have 26 elementary schools in Anoka-Hennepin, and we have 5 clusters. Clusters are defined by those schools that ultimately their students feed into our high schools. So tonight, as you know, we're talking about the Anoka cluster. These are our elementary schools where their students ultimately will attend Anoka High School. With regard to our Anoka cluster schools, elementary schools, really only 3 are impacted by our recommendation at this time. And those are Ramsey Elementary School, Lincoln Elementary School, and Franklin Elementary School. If your son or daughter currently attends Ramsey or Lincoln, there will be no changes for those students. The boundary recommendations are a result of the repurposing that we are embarking on for Franklin Elementary School. And that's due largely to a declining enrollment and some other factors. So at this time, if you look at the map here, what you see are the current boundaries for Franklin, Lincoln, and Ramsey Elementary School. So Franklin's boundary is in yellow, Lincoln Elementary School's current boundary is in pink, and Ramsey's current boundary is in green. So we're going to transition to our proposal, and on this map you'll see a dotted line which represents Franklin's current boundary, and in pink and green are the proposed boundaries for Lincoln and Ramsey respectively. We came with a proposal at the September 26th school board meeting. At that time, this was the proposal that we brought forward, which essentially moves a chunk of Franklin students who are south of Main Street and to the east of Roanoke. Those students currently attend Franklin Elementary School, and in our proposal we would move them to Lincoln Elementary School. And then the remaining part of Franklin's current boundary, which you see essentially on either side of Highway 10 moving to the west toward Elk River, our proposal is to have those students move to Ramsey Elementary School. As a part of our feedback process and previous meetings, we did receive feedback to evaluate certain neighborhoods for specific criteria to determine whether or not a shift may be warranted. And in those cases, we did evaluate that, and we balanced those. We always evaluate that and many other factors, but we balance those back with our parameters. And so part of our parameters are ensuring that our schools are essentially right-sized for enrollment, meaning that we don't want them to have too low of an enrollment. We don't want them to be overcrowded either. And after that evaluation, we essentially concluded that we're going to stick with, at this time, our current recommendation that we provided to the school board on September 26th. But I will say that saying that, that decision hasn't yet been made. The school board makes that final decision. So I want to encourage you to provide us with feedback if you haven't yet had an opportunity to do that. In terms of just kind of how we received feedback up until this point, these meetings have been one avenue where we have an opportunity to just talk face-to-face with folks, but sometimes they can't make it for a variety of different reasons. And so we do have also online forums available. You can access those at ageschools.us, /boundary feedback, or email us at boundaries@ahschools.us. So what are some of the trending topics or major issues that we're hearing from folks? The first one is neighborhood changes. As I mentioned earlier, if you really enjoy your elementary school, you don't want to move. And so just kind of giving us feedback on the fact that you'd prefer not to change, or maybe you don't want to go to a school you've been assigned to in the current proposal. So we listen to those, absolutely. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we kind of evaluate and weigh those against the parameters that we set out in our boundary process. We receive requests to review maps, and a lot of times that has to do with where a border has been drawn. Someone's residence is really close to that, so they want to be sure that they're clear about where they may fall in a proposed boundary. In-district transfer and open enrollment policies. We do have students that are attending schools and they may live outside a boundary. We do have policies to address those types of issues, and those are things that we can certainly talk on an individual basis about with you. And then special education. In some cases, we have students who receive special education services, and as a result of those services, they may attend a different elementary school than the one they reside. So there are a lot of variables there. What we can ensure, as both Dr. Wolverton and Dr. McGuire pointed out, is we are proud of the fact that regardless of the elementary school you attend in our school district, the curriculum is constant, the services are the same, and we feel really good about the experience that our students get regardless of where they attend school. So with that, just moving forward, if there are things that you want to be sure we know about, I want to encourage you to reach out either through our website, as we mentioned before, ahschools /boundaries, and fill out the survey that's there, or email boundaries@ahschools.us. With that, I just want to thank you for being here tonight, and like I said, just encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you and have a great night.